I want to try and summarize some of the key takeaways from this brilliant book. I've read it back to back a few times. It's just rich with just such relevant information for health in the modern day. He's all about proactive health. He wants to prevent rather than just wait for people to get sick and then treat his patients. So he sets people up with the knowledge and the tools so they are far less likely to get sick and live a higher quality life. And then he outlines that in the first chapter. Part 2 is more about understanding how the major diseases of the West progress. And he starts with metabolism because it flows on to heart disease in chapter 7, cancer in chapter 8, and neurodegenerative diseases in chapter 9. And he goes into a fantastic amount of detail on all of those things. Now, he defines metabolism as the breaking down of food, everything that we eat, into the building blocks of everything that goes into the body to keep it healthy. Essentially, the breaking down of micronutrients to send them to places where they are needed. And most of the metabolic health problems are exactly as this chapter defines it. It's a crisis of having too much food. Little known fact that more people die every year worldwide of eating too much than not eating enough, which is crazy. The key takeaways for me has been understanding what is metabolic syndrome. So he's got here 5 criteria. You only need 3 of these things to be diagnosed with metabolic syndrome. Got a little figure here from the States, but Australia is not too dissimilar. We've got on the left side the percentage of the population defined as obese by body mass index, not obese on the right hand side here, and then the dotted line in the middle is what percentage actually have metabolic syndrome. So nearly 2/3 of the people in the obese category do, and surprisingly, people who are not obese still in Australia, I've put my own little figures here, 20 to 35% are estimated in Australia to be to have metabolic syndrome. And these guys, as I'll read in a second, are at 3 times the risk of all-cause mortality compared to the metabolically healthy individuals, because they can't store fat safely. They don't have the genes to store fat safely under the skin. So myself, I'd be in that group of people that, really struggle to put on any weight, to store fat. And if I was metabolically unhealthy, that fat would be stored in unsafe places around the organs, in the muscle tissue, and that's just recipe for disaster. Super surprising. That really blew me out. That a couple of things going on there. People that are quite lean are in a very high risk category if they're not metabolically healthy. And then other people who are classified as obese, a good 1/3 of them are metabolically healthy. And I suppose that's to do with body composition. A lot of very muscular, stocky individuals can still come in at a high BMI and not be carrying a lot of unnecessary fat and fat around the organs. He goes into a little bit of detail on the importance of actually having subcutaneous fat or fat under the skin, although society sees it as pretty undesirable, it's actually the right place for it to be stored. It acts as a metabolic buffer zone, allowing you to release energy as you need it throughout the day-to-day activities, as long as you are active. Got to be active. And this is the places that you don't want it to end up. He's got a bit of detail here on consuming to excess, and especially in those lean individuals that carry that pot belly, all the different places that it ends up as visceral fat. Ends up in the liver, in the heart, in the muscles, kidneys, and worst of all in the pancreas, because it's this negative feedback loop that impairs insulin secretion. And as you read throughout this book, insulin is mentioned many times as one of the key drivers for all of those he calls them the 4 horsemen, the main diseases that take us out in the West. He touches a little bit on the genetics. So people of Asian descent, they're generally recognized as being leaner, but evolutionary speaking, they had a harder time storing fat for the winter when they needed it. It's a good thing. It's a good thing for the body to be able to store fat easily. It's just in today's in the era of today, we're just not moving enough. We're at desks all day, and we're eating high energy food 3-4 times a day, whereas evolutionary speaking, people probably weren't very hungry very often and had to do a hell of a lot of movement to find their food. And now all we've got to do is click on Uber Eats, right? It's that fucking easy. This section he's touching a little bit on hormones. So the sex hormones, cortisol and insulin, and I really like this section because it's saying how much stress has to do with storing that harmful visceral fat. Low amounts of sleep with high levels of cortisol, generally exactly what goes on when we're fucking stressed out. Cortisol is this double-edged effect of it depletes subcutaneous fat and replaces it more with harmful fat around our organs. Little section here talking about insulin, how it's a potent growth signaling hormone. It's not just about jamming glucose into muscle cells. It also is a signaling hormone that fosters both heart disease and cancer. So we want a low circulating glucose level, fasting glucose, and we don't want to be insulin resistant. A little deeper into the book, after he gives you an understanding of why we're doing this thing called living, he goes into a fair bit of detail on the exercise components. He breaks them up into a few different groups. The stability, which is essentially flows into strength. You don't want to be doing strength training without understanding the importance of stability. But in touching with our metabolic health that we were talking about before, here's where it's at. This is the best way to improve your mitochondrial health and your overall ability to metabolize what we're eating, putting the nutrients where we need them, essentially. And the best way to do that is a shit ton of zone 2 exercise. So that's exercise that gets your heart rate up enough that you are just able to get your sentences out when you're talking to a friend. If you don't have a heart rate monitor, if you do, it's just 220 minus your age, which gives you your maximum heart rate estimated, and then you're looking at about, I got it wrong the other day, it's 70 to 80% of your maximum heart rate, which for me as a 40-year-old is around 130 to 140 beats per minute. And keeping it in that zone for minimum of 150 minutes a week, minimum. Anywhere up of north of there is highly beneficial. So 80% of the amount of time that we should be active, we should be in zone 2 for our workouts. The other part of his cardio equation is training for VO2 max, because it is the highest indicator of any health metric you can get from any of your bloods, your gene type, anything. VO2 max is correlated with lifespan, but also what I'm interested in is more about quality of life. It's a cool little graph. He's got age 25 to 95, VO2 max, fuck all to athletes essentially, and where you want to be when you're a certain age, if you want to be able to do certain things in your later years. Essentially, the fitter you are, the higher your VO2 max will correlate with the simple things that we take for granted now, that in our 70s, 80s, 90s equate to much higher quality of life. So things, if you enjoy your hikes, if you enjoy golf or archery, or even being able to pick up grandkids, stuff like that, get up off the floor unassisted, open a jar, just day-to-day stuff. VO2 max is just the best metric for measuring your overall quality of life later on down the track. It goes into detail about how to train for that, and the studies all keep coming back to the Norwegian 4x4, which is essentially 4 minutes as higher intensity cardio training as you can maintain for those 4 minutes. A 4-minute rest period where your heart rate drops back down below 100 beats per minute, and you do that 4 times. So four rounds, and essentially you only need to do that a couple of times a week. He doesn't really recommend any more than 2 or 3 times a week. Even once a week is sufficient to see some real progress on moving the VO2 max needle, which is very slow to move, in the right direction. Start creeping it up. So the higher that you get your VO2 max, the more likely it is you'll be able to carry out these simple tasks later on in life. I just love the fact that he insists so frequently in this book that by the time we're 70s, 80s, 90s, we don't have to be rattling with pills. We don't have to be in a bloody wheelchair or a walker or housebound. Power is in our hands to move all of these health metrics in the right direction, so as though we're increasing our quality. This is one of his own little graphs that kind of paints that detail. Lifespan, so obviously when we're born, when we die. Health span is pretty much how capable we are, both cognitively and physically. So when we're young, obviously we're able to climb trees, run up flights of stairs, play sports all day, swim all day. Kids are just full of beans, and then the inevitable decline of age gets a hold of us. That's the first solid line here, is just life without any form of medicine. Now if we look at the dotted line here, he's called it medicine 2.0, which is essentially pharmaceuticals. No doctor really prescribes how much sleep you should be getting, how much exercise, the right type of nutrition and stuff, which is his model, medicine 3.0. Now this is his business. This is what this guy does. He takes healthy people that are interested in quality of life, which is all of this big fat white section in the middle here is quality of life. He empowers people to make their own choices through giving them the understanding of how to get up here. And as we've touched on, metabolic health, very important because it leads to all of the main killers in the Western world, the main diseases, but also that zone 2 cardio, VO2 max, and in a minute we'll touch on a little bit on strength and stability being super important as well. He touches on strength training for a couple of reasons that were quite surprising to me. One of them was obvious, like obviously the older we get, the weaker we are, and the less able we are to catch ourselves falling and pick ourselves up off the floor. The less skeletal muscle around our joints, so the greater the chance of more significant injury. But one of the more interesting ones was the fact that the bulk of our mitochondria, so they're the little bacteria type organelles that live this beautiful symbiotic relationship within our body. Mitochondria exist in every cell except for our red blood cells, but predominantly in muscles, and they are what give us the ability to turn glucose into energy and effectively move our body. The better your mitochondrial health, the better your metabolism, the better your metabolic health, your ability to get that glucose into the muscle where it's supposed to be, just like fat is supposed to be stored in subcutaneous fat under the skin. Glucose is meant to be stored either as backup in the liver or in the muscles ready to go. You don't want that glucose to be left in circulation where it's going to wreak havoc on our body. So the more muscle that we have, the better ability we have to store that glucose safely. So he focused on strength training for that reason too, which I found just fascinating. He trains strength in 5 key areas. So grip strength, that equates to quality of life later on as well. Our ability to exert force on the world. When he gets his patients in, he likes to get them to make a bit of a list of things that they want to do in their retirement years. So they like hiking, hike up a hilly trail, get up off the floor under our own steam, pick up a kid, carry groceries for a few blocks, lifting a suitcase overhead on a plane, balance type stuff, having sex, his own little nuances here. He sets a really high bar for himself and other patients, which I love. I love that. He wants to be able to swim half a mile in 20 minutes. Walk with a 30-pound dumbbell in each hand for a minute. He's into his archery, doing pull-ups, climb 90 stairs in 2 minutes. So you need a VO2 max of about 32 to do that. Dead hangs. He's into his race car driving, so he wants to be able to have pretty consistent times throughout the course of his life. 20-pound backpack for hiking through the hills, carrying his own luggage, stuff like that. To achieve that, you not only need fitness, but you need that. With his strength training, he focuses on about 5 different key areas, one of them being grip strength. This one here was new to me, which I've changed up big time. So attention to both concentric and eccentric phases of weightlifting. So not just contraction of the muscle, but also strength involved in extending that muscle as well. So that means like box steps are a good example. A good slow 3-second step onto the box with one leg, but also a 3-second step off that box back in the other direction, and that takes some serious strength. Good form, good stability. Yeah, that's super important for as we age. We want that stability, being able to step off anything. Pulling motions. And hip hinging movements, so all of your squats and deadlift, hip thrusters, they're the 5 key areas he likes to train. All of them, he goes into a lot of detail on the foundation of having good form and stability later on in the book, which he provides good videos online, really good videos explaining just how complex good stability actually is. If there's anything I've come across out there that compiles so much relevant information on health and how to improve quality of life, it is this book by this man. He is just a guru on the topic. Literally is his business, is empowering people and giving them information and tools that you need to live longer. He's done a really good job of outlining how to do that within a book. Totally recommend it.